I do first want to say we have a lot of observers here tonight, and I just want to make sure that nobody talks. The representatives and the witnesses will be the only people talking, and it's really important that you keep quiet back there. And also, please turn off your cell phones, which I will now do. Okay. So I would propose that we mark the association's book as Association Exhibit 1 and the board's books 1 and 2 as Board 1 and 2. I understand that you will not have looked at every page in the other person's book, and so if there are items which you find objectionable, then it is that those objections at a later time. You're not accepting everything at this point before you've seen it. Is that acceptable?
It is. Thank you.
All right. Have you agreed on an order for tonight?
I believe we have. Marilyn and I discussed the parties, starting with a relatively brief opening statement, and then we have agreed to present Rob Fitzpatrick as the board's witness on the issue of insurance. The parties have been working through the process, and we've now narrowed the issues to essentially 3 sets of issues, which are salary, insurance, and stipends, which is, I think, not surprising that those would, particularly salary and insurance, be the issues last to be resolved. So we would propose to present Rob as the witness after the opening statements. I have some questions for him. He has some materials to share with the panel. And then after cross-examination and the panel's questions, we'll defer to the association in terms of whether it wishes to present another witness. And Marilyn, I'm not sure if you've made that decision yet.
We'll most likely have our own insurance consultant. Dave is, I don't think here yet, testify after Rob. Unless for some reason everything is covered in Rob's testimony and we don't need to put him on.
Okay.
But most likely we'll have Dave testify briefly as well.
All right. Who goes first in your opening statements?
I'm prepared to go first, but I, of course, would defer to the association if that were its preference.
Tom, go right ahead.
Okay. On behalf of the Wilton Board of Education, I'd like to just say that this is not a time of business as usual. And what I'd like to do in the next 10 minutes or so is just explain why we're here. And to do that most effectively, I've culled from... I think it's really important that the parties in the panel not lose sight of the forest for the trees. And the goal of my opening statement is to frame this by selecting a limited number of exhibits from the book for your quick reference to get a flavor for what the challenges here are. And so with the panel's permission, I'd like to distribute a brief opening statement that I'll actually give. It's more in outline form. But each of the attachments is already in evidence. It's really for your convenient reference. And I've given the chair, the court reporter's copy of that.
Yes.
If I might, and the outline is not word for word, and I'm certainly not going to read it, and you don't even have to pay attention to it, at least while I'm talking. The teacher contract is the biggest contract for any town, and Wilton is no exception, and this is a critically important time. The board has made proposals through bargaining that reflect its profound concern that the Board of Education in the town of Wilton not assume new obligations that are unreasonable and unjustified in these very difficult and uncertain times. And so as a matter of public trust and accountability, we find ourselves here of necessity because the offers to settle made by the association have, in the board's mind, been irresponsible and would impose new obligations on the board that are simply unreasonable at this time. I would like to separate two very different concepts. We have a disagreement in a collective bargaining context, but we don't want to lose sight of the fact that we don't have a disagreement with our teachers as people or as professionals, and that the Board of Education starts this process with an acknowledgement of the important and excellent work that the Wilton teachers do, and nothing we do here is intended in any way, shape, or form to be critical of the teachers and the contribution they make to the students here in Wilton. This is a business disagreement over what the terms of a collective bargaining agreement should be. There is a direct impact on teachers, however, and that's more than whoever wins the higher salary. What you'll see is that over the last 3 years, since the last settlement, the Board of Education has struggled to make ends meet when the appropriations haven't kept pace with the obligations under a contract negotiated right when things were starting to go bad. But we really had no idea when we agreed to new costs of 3.9%, 4.2%, and 4.2%, just how significantly different things would be. And so we proceed here with grave concerns about the future. And if you'll just look, we have first, the first exhibit is just to show that in the last 8 years, the federal debt has increased from $3.9 trillion, which was horrific, to over $9 trillion. And just from last year to this year, another $1.5 trillion of debt. The teachers are going to tell you Wilton can afford whatever their offer is, we can afford it. And the truth of the matter is that we as a country, we as a state, are swimming in debt, and someone's going to have to pay the bills. And that responsibility is going to fall to all the taxpayers, federally and state, and particularly to the taxpayers in the communities that are more affluent. And so as we look at this amazing record over the last several years of racking up debt and selling our future to China, we know that the bill is going to come due, and we ask the panel, as a matter of considering the public interest and financial capability, to realize that someone's going to have to pay these bills. It's going to include the taxpayers here in Wilton. At the state level, we have a problem which is very similar, just on a smaller scale. The taxpayers in Wilton, along with the taxpayers in Connecticut generally, just experienced the largest tax increase in Connecticut history. The state workers gave up $1 billion in concessions. And we find ourselves, nonetheless, still in huge debt that over the long haul is going to have to be repaid. And the third exhibit in this little synopsis shows that right now our long-term obligations here in Connecticut, this little state of Connecticut, exceed $70 billion. Now, I presume that somewhere in this thick book that the association has presented, you're going to get word that everything is turning around and things are getting rosy. And in fact, you may hear that there's a projected budget surplus for the current year of $100 million. The next exhibit puts that in perspective. That little line is $100 million. That big bar is $70 billion. So that's what we owe. That's the surplus for this year. So any thought that we are out of the woods, that somehow, because through the largest tax increase in Connecticut history, we are now running a little bit of a surplus, and so everything's fine and you should give the union its offer and impose that upon the taxpayers here in Wilton, is irresponsible. We are in a time of crisis. We need to exercise significant restraint. The sad fact is that every other bargaining unit in Wilton has recognized that this is and needs to be a time of significant restraint. And you see here that in what's attached here as part of the opening statement, every other bargaining unit for the Board of Education has taken at least 1-0 in the last several years. We see here, when we flip the page, that every single bargaining unit on the town side has taken a 0 in one of the 3 years. We asked the teachers to come to the table and talk about making concessions, and they did agree to talk. Unfortunately, despite the good faith efforts by both parties, we were unable to do that. And so the board was burdened with the full extent of the settlement from last year, 3.9, 4.2, 4.2. And the next exhibit shows you the impact on everybody, teachers, students, the community, when contractual obligations exceed the ability of the community. And we're going to be debating that, I understand that, but I will restate the ability of a community to pay additional tax increases. And you see here that there have been a significant number of staff cuts here in Wilton because of the difference between the new funds available and the obligations under the last contract. When we reached the settlement 3 years ago, the statistics showed that the average teacher salary in Wilton was the highest in Durgay. That's the next slide, 2008-2009. One of the frustrations when we produce statistics is the delay between the reality and the time it takes for someone to compile the information and to disseminate it. So what we did, because our firm happens to represent all of the Durgay towns, and so we have the actual FTE information for all these towns, we took a snapshot this year. And the next slide shows that the average teacher salary in Wilton, in accordance with our agreed TEG, the teacher experience grid, is $86,000. It's the highest in Durgay, and it's the highest by a significant number. The closest to Wilton is New Canaan, which you'll see has a measured wealth which is significantly different from Wilton's. And you see Darien, which has a significantly higher wealth, has an average teacher salary of almost $8,000 less than Wilton. So we are in a situation in which moderation is desperately needed and completely justified. So as we go forward with the last thing I'll mention is that the teacher salary schedule for the career track that all teachers in Wilton are able to achieve if they wish to get a 6-year degree, again, the highest in Durgay at $104,000. So the Board of Education and the community have been incredibly supportive of Wilton teachers over the years, as is reflected in the salary schedule and the working conditions in the excellent schools that are here in Wilton. This is a time of need. This is a time for sacrifice. The teacher's first offer was 3% plus step for over 15% for 3 years. The board's offer across the table, when the board offered in excess of 3% for 3 years, I don't forget if the word was laughable or whatever, but it was just dismissed by the teachers, despite the information that you see here. And I really don't know where the Wilton teachers are today, because their official position remains 3% plus step for over 15% a year. I'm sure they're going to change it, but we have yet to see that, and here we are in arbitration. Thank you.
Thank you. Marilyn?
One sec.
Sure.
Sorry.
No rush.
I'm going to do a brief opening statement to respond to some of what you've said, Tom, and to voice where we're thinking is in this process. I do have a presentation put together that focuses on the financials, but I don't necessarily think that this is the appropriate time to do that whole presentation, since we really have tomorrow, I think, reserved for that piece. I do, however, want to touch upon some of the pieces of it and some of the things that have been going on. The Wilton Education Association came to this process looking basically to get a fair deal, something that was fair for the teachers and the community and the students of this school district. Yes, our initial proposals were 3% plus step. That's actually pretty typical. And if you look at the initial proposals of the other towns that have settled this year, you wouldn't be surprised to see that they were pretty similar. It's a typical opening statement offer. And in part, that's because we didn't really know where this season was going to go. We didn't know what you were going to be looking for insurance concessions. To us, it's a package deal. It's not simply salary. It's a package deal that encompasses salary, insurance, and concessions from that, and working conditions. One important note to make, you claim that the Wilton teachers have the highest average salaries in the DIRG. They also have the longest school day in the state. They have a 400-minute day, which is, there is one charter school that has that length of day as well. No other school does. So that factors in. Additionally, Wilton likes to attract and retain experienced teachers with degrees and with a lot of years. In my presentation, either later today or tomorrow, I will show you the statistics on that. We have a high percentage of people with PhDs and 6-year certificates here compared to our comparable towns. That also explains part of the reason that our average salaries are so high. When you look at our actual salary schedule, however, if we were to hire people with the similar experience levels and degrees as other towns, our average salaries wouldn't be as high, because when we look at our starting salaries are very low compared to comparable districts, and our master's maximum is lower than it should be compared to the wealth ranking of this town. That I will go into in more specifics. On top of all of that, on the record, you referred back, you don't know where we're going because our official position hasn't changed. But the truth of the matter is, we also have had off-the-record conversations that I will not get into because it's inappropriate. But we also, as recently as the past couple of weeks, sent a request sent by the chair of the WEA team asking, again, is there any possible way that we can settle this? We sent data showing what the recent settlements have been for all comparable towns, and we said, can we settle somewhere in this range? We're willing to still continue to talk. At that point, we already had started the bump and run process, but we had plenty of time before the arbitration hearings had started. And the reason that we did that is because we want to be fair. We still, to this day, want to be fair. We want to find a way, if possible, to settle this contract with a salary number that is in a reasonable range when we look at our comparable districts. And we're willing to give you insurance concessions. You will see, as part of the agreed language that the union has already agreed to, we have agreed to make significant insurance concessions. That is in the agreed language we have submitted. That's not an issue. We're willing to increase our co-pays on our PPO and EPO plans significantly to realize substantial savings for the board. So yes, we are asking for salary in return for that. We cannot give all of these insurance concessions and take a zero. It doesn't make sense. It's not fair to our members to get hit with thousands of dollars in extra insurance costs and then still be at the same salary. So yes, we are. We are asking for an increase, but we're asking for modest increases, to be frank. I also would like to note that we recognize that this is an unfortunate position that both parties are in. We recognize that the board has constituents, that the Board of Education and Board of Finance both feel that they need to listen to public sentiments and take all of that into consideration. But putting that in context, if you really want to represent the public, it makes sense to try to craft a settlement that would entail significant insurance concessions and moderate increases. That's what we're looking to do still today. Another point that I would like to make is that there was a comment made that all town unions took a zero. The firefighters, however, didn't realize they were doing that because recently in the paper there's an article about how they're going to arbitration through the grievance process because they thought they were still getting their step increases. For whatever reason, they thought they were giving a general wage increase freeze, but that they were still getting their step increases. There's a dispute going through litigation on that. The other point that I want to make about our salaries. Tom talked about how we're getting these wonderful increases over the years. I will have data and show you that if you look at the past 10-year increases that we've gotten for the BA stuff, the typical things that you look at to see how a district is comparing, starting salaries, master's max, and 6-year max, the raises that we've gotten, that the WE has gotten over the last 10 years, are very reasonable. As a matter of fact, they're kind of low. We're losing ground on our standing in the salary schedules. You will see that 3 years ago when we negotiated our last contract, our standings in the starting salary and the master's max were much better than they are today. We've lost ground since even 3 years ago. So to ask us to lose even more ground while agreeing to make insurance concessions, to us is too much to ask. You will see that in line with the email that our chair of our team sent looking for something more in line with the recent settlements, the proposal that we're making in these last best offers is in line with comparable district settlements when you look at it as a package. So I hope that you look at that carefully. We're willing to still continue discussion if that would be fruitful. And the final point that I want to make is all of the economic data that Tom just presented was on a statewide or a federal level, which is fair enough. That it's not inappropriate to talk about that data, but we have a lot of data in this book and in our presentation about the financial status of Wilton and other comparable communities and where you stand in reference to them in conjunction with the settlements that they just got this year. And we're putting into evidence settlements from this current bargaining year because, frankly, if we included settlements from prior years, they would be higher. So we're only asking you to look at the settlements from this current season, which are much lower than they were for the past, few years. So we're not even asking you to give us settlements like last year or the year before or 3 years ago. We're looking to get something in line with the settlements that have come in this season. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Just two very quick rejoinded. One of the problems with teacher arbitration is what role the number for the season plays, the tyranny of the other settlements. And it's the panel's responsibility, and I'm confident that this panel will exercise that responsibility appropriately. There's nothing in the statute that says the percentage increase. The statute is salary comparisons. The statute talks about the priority consideration of financial capability and the public interest. The percentage settlement in Darien is not one of the issues that the panel can consider. And the other thing is that I was just making an opening statement, but the Board of Finance is here separately appearing and will present local information so that the panel is fully apprised of the compelling circumstances here in Wilton. Thank you.
And just in a very brief statement in response to that, I appreciate the statement that you're supposed to look at the financial, not just these percentages, because if you were to look more broadly than that, you would look and realize that we should actually get more of a percentage than the average, since our settlements over the past 10 years have been lower. In order for us to catch up, realistically, we would need a higher increase than we're asking for.
Thank you.
The Board of Education calls Robert Fitzpatrick as its first witness.
Tom,
Of course.
Sorry, I just need to get...
Do you need a break?
No, I just wanted to make sure Dave was here. I didn't see him come in.
Oh, fine.
Would you stand, please? Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Have a seat and give your name to the court report, please.
Robert Fitzpatrick.
Is the panel ready to proceed?
We are ready. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Fitzpatrick, what position do you hold?
I'm the principal of CBC Kane Partners.
And what is that?
We're an employee benefits and consulting firm.
And how long have you been have you had that responsibility?
I've been the principal of the firm since it merged about 2 years ago, but I've been in the business for more than 23 years.
I see. And could you briefly describe to the panel your background and experience relative to working with employers and employee groups in collective bargaining to try to structure cost-effective insurance plans that balance the need to protect employee interests with fiscal responsibility?
It's a mouthful. Question.
You can just say yes.
Yes. Makes it easy. I began working actually with the teachers union back in 2005, 2006 as a consultant. I originally started here in the town of Wilton as an insurance advisory committee chairman and started working with the teachers union around the state, doing negotiations, assisting not only the teachers union, police, fire, most of the other unions throughout the state.
Could we just back up? Where do you live?
I live in Wilton.
And was it in that capacity that you became a citizen volunteer on that advisory committee?
That is correct.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to give that context.
No problem. As part of my role in doing that, I was advising some of the union folks about some of the issues with health insurance and the cost increases. But at the same token, I was also exposing some of the things that should be done in lieu of knee-jerk reaction changes. There's a fine balance in the health insurance, and I'm always a big proponent of telling both sides it's not a fight between the two sides, it's a fight against the insurance carriers.
And how is it that you find yourself sitting there today?
I don't know. No. Be nice to my boys, okay? As a resident of the town, I am concerned with the increases that we face in health insurance. But in the same token, I understand the need for the teachers to have very good benefit programs. I felt that my relationship with the union, particularly WEA in the past, plus being a resident of town, I could probably shed some light and help the major parties together on some common ground for the health insurance.
Okay. Thank you. And did you assist the board in preparing and presenting to the association a proposal for HSA sole option health insurance plan?
I did.
Okay. And could you grab the thicker of the two books there, which is book
Pretty
one?
big, Tom.
Yes. And
Book 1 of 2?
yes.
Okay.
And if you open it up, the fourth page should say History of Negotiations.
Yes.
And I just wanted you, could you page forward to Exhibit 11 and 12 and identify those documents?
These are, I'll wait for
Exhibit 11?
Exhibit as well. That's it.
This is 12.
Keep going back.
From the beginning of that.
There we go. On Exhibit 11, what I've done, this is a document my office created, and what we were trying to express was the total cost based upon the allocation rate or allocated premium rate for the benefit program, for the medical benefit program, along with the benefits on a side-by-side basis of the PPO versus the HSA.
And so this was the description of the proposed HSA-only plan and the related cost implications?
This is the description of the proposed HSA plan and the breakdown of the full cost, yes.
And did you come to negotiations in this room and present an explanation of this plan to the association in a bargaining session?
I did.
And could you identify Exhibit 12, please?
I did. Exhibit 12 is a PowerPoint presentation that I prepared that goes into a general overview of a high deductible health plan HSA program, the pros and cons, and the financial impact to the employees and how that financial impact will work out in comparing it versus the current PPO plan.
Do you think it's possible to structure an HSA-only health insurance plan that provides high-quality care, that imposes no significant new costs on teachers, but will result in savings to both teachers and the board in accordance with their relative premium contribution?
Absolutely.
Could you tell the panel how that's possible?
The high deductible health plans have a large discount pricing from the administrator of the plan, Anthem, in this case. So with the high deductible being set at $2,000, $4,000, it's creating a relativity of more than 20% savings when you look at the allocation premium rates. Okay, I keep using the term allocation. I'll come back to that later to explain that. When you look at that reduction in cost, the original proposal set on the table also had some prescription drug co-payments after the deductible was met, which increased the savings an additional almost 6%. The total savings when we initially presented it on a premium-wide basis was 27% reduction from the current PPO rates. However, having such a large deductible up front of $2,000 single, $4,000 a family would be an unnecessary burden on the employee. So the board was willing to contribute 50% of that deductible into a health savings account. Health savings account is not the insurance. The high deductible health plan is the insurance. The health savings account is a banking account where monies can be set aside on a pre-tax basis to pay for non-reimbursed medical expenses. Based upon the original proposal, the maximum out-of-pocket liability for the medical part of the plan would have been $1,000 a single and $2,000 a family. If a participant of the plan had any prescription drugs in excess of that deductible, then they would be responsible for that proposal, copay amounts of that proposal.
Have the parties modified the HSA and put it into the agreed language? And if I could just pause for a second, the panel's walking in here and you are just trying to catch up with months of discussion. What you'll see in the agreed language is that the PPO, as Marilyn said, is still in the agreed language. An HSA plan is now in the agreed language. And our fundamental disagreement, and sadly you're going to have to rule, is whether we consider the PPO available only for people who are ineligible because they receive Medicare or otherwise for the HSA, or whether, as the association would have you find, that the HSA should simply be added. But we now, in the agreed language, have an HSA, and Mr. Fitzpatrick, I'm just about to ask him how it's different from the original proposal. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want me to go through?
Please. Or we'll just explain just fundamentally, and then we'll go to your presentation. But what's different about the prescription as it ended up in the agreed language?
The original proposal that the board had presented was a $10 generic, after the deductible was met, a $10 generic, $25 for brand name, and $40 for non-formulary. The board has restructured that program to remove those co-payments so we can clearly define the maximum out-of-pocket liability for each member that participates in this plan. They would be basically responsible for $1,000 maximum cost out of pocket, a single, and $2,000 maximum cost out of pocket for a family. There's no additional copays for prescription drugs. And that is based upon the deductible being $2,000 single, $4,000 family, and the board's contribution of 50% of that deductible, which is $1,000, $2,000.
And when would under the revised agreed language, when would the prescription coverage come in? And could I direct your attention?
Yes, please.
In the book, under the next tab is agreed language.
Yes.
And at page 13, you'll see the agreed language on the HSA plan, paragraph 2.
You said page 13?
Yes,
Page 13.
page 13. So would that come in the third year at a lower rate?
Yes, it was modified to mirror the current prescription drug co-payments on their current PPO plan. So that would come in at a later date at $5, $20, $35. $5 for generic, $20 for brand name, $35 for non-formulary.
And if I could then direct your attention 2 more tabs further to insurance exhibits. Do you see where from the agreed language, 2 more tabs? It says insurance exhibits. The tab, insurance exhibit.
No, it's behind it, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Got it.
And could you identify that document? And basically, at this point, I'm going to ask you to explain to the panel your analysis of the current situation and your findings relative to costs, benefits, and employee welfare.
This is the document that I created for this arbitration to try to give a general overview of what a high deductible health plan and an HSA bank account's role is in health insurance for the employees. Do you want me to go through that?
Well,
or
let me
cross-
acknowledge that the panel is experienced, and so some of the fundamental concepts of the HSA, except as the panel may have questions, may be unnecessary. But I do think it's important for you to share with the panel your findings in terms of how the board's proposal affects employees, how the board's proposal affects the board's financial obligations.
Okay. So midway through the proposal is a premium cost share breakdown. 84% paid for by the employer, 16% paid for by the employee. And I compared that with the current cost of the PPO plan and current cost of the Blue Care POE plan. The POE currently has a 13% premium cost share, and the PPO has a 18% premium cost share currently. The total cost, premium-wise or allocation cost-wise, is $6,299,156. If we were to move to the presented HSA program with a $4,000 deductible, 100% coverage thereafter, no prescription drug co-payments, the premium cost or premium allocation cost would move down to $4,825,287. However, the board is still responsible for a deductible contribution of 50% for each and every teacher, $1,000 for singles, $2,000 for two-person, $2,000 for families, and that adds an additional $564,000 to the cost of the plan.
I'm sorry, an additional what?
$564,000. The total liability to the Board of Ed, and the teachers, because this is full allocated premium, is $5.3 million. Now, when we apply the premium cost share in the next box below, the Board of Ed, under the current arrangement of 13% for the POE and 18% for the PPO, the Board of Ed's liability is $5.2 million. Moving forward, if we were to have the HSA go in with all participants of the WAEA enrolling in this plan at a 16% premium cost share for everybody, would have a net cost of $4.6 million, a savings of $594,000. That's the benefit to the Board of Ed, $594,000. To the teachers, there is savings premium cost share wise. When we look at the premium cost share wise under the PPO, which has slightly more than 90% of the enrollment, a single person will save $536.66 as a single participant. A two-person would save $1,118, and a family would save $1,457 in premium cost share. The participants of the POE plan, who still pay 13% of the cost, would also have some savings, but those savings would be very small. In comparison, $20 for a single, $72 for a two-person, and $43 for a family.
If I could just ask for clarification, on this document you have POE. In the agreed language we say EPO. Is that the same thing?
It is the same thing. POE is a product term for Blue Cross Blue Shield.
And while we're on the subject, as you noted, there's a premium difference of 5% under the EPO. What's the difference? How is life different if you're in the EPO versus the PPO? And is it really warranted to have a 5% premium differential?
I don't remember when the EPO plan came into existence. I believe it was here before 2003 when I originally first started working as the insurance advisory chairman. But at that time, we had the EPO having a trend rate differential of probably 5% on an ongoing basis year over year.
So it was justified at the time.
At the time. Since then, Blue Cross has moved to make their primary product the Century Preferred PPO, and they have not given the same relativities to their EPO POE product. And those relativities have shrunk. And at best, you have $100 a month savings on a family, and that will probably shrink year over year.
So if a person chooses the EPO at a 5% reduction in premium share, the board loses money.
That is correct.
And would it be your recommendation to continue the EPO? It's in the agreed language, but what's your recommendation?
It is not my recommendation to continue the EPO plan. The savings will be eroded year over year ongoing. One of the key elements of why the differential in cost that Blue Cross now applies pretty much the same relativity, in some cases higher relativities for their EPO plans, POE plans, is back in 2003 when you enrolled in the EPO plan. For those of us in this business, we remember you had only access to the providers in the state of Connecticut and one county outside the state. That is no longer the case. Anthem has acquired Empire Blue Cross Blue Shield, so you have all of the New York doctors. It's pretty much the same network as the PPO plan.
I just wanted to take that opportunity to clarify the different terminology in the contract versus your analysis. It is the same thing. And could you please proceed with your analysis in terms of how the board offer affects employees?
Okay, so what I was also able to do, if you just turn 2 pages over from that last page, I had gone back to Blue Cross and using their claims data and some specific questions that I posed to Blue Cross, we were able to calculate the employee out-of-pocket expenses. And currently, they couldn't break it out for just the WEA. So this is Wilton Board of Ed in general, PPO and EPO members combined. So a single person during the prior 12 months, ending in June 30th, 2011, a single person average spend would be $591.67 over a 12-month period. Two-person would spend $1,255, and a family would spend $1,533 in co-payments under the current PPO and EPO programs.
Where is that? I just want to make sure I'm following the
It's
right
two
thing.
that's the next page right there, Tom.
Oh, no wonder. Thank you.
Okay. So I just wanted to bring that out because now when you tie those averages in with their premium cost share currently, you will see that the cost of the current PPO and EPO plan is actually more expensive to the employee than the high deductible health
I'm
plan.
confused about this. Is this what you're on this chart here?
Yes, this chart here.
What's the first column, average medical expense?
It's the average out-of-pocket expense that the employees actually pay at the provider's office. The co-payments, deductibles, co-insurance, prescription drug co-payments.
For who? For an average employee?
What we did was we took the total amount of co-payments divided by the number of members
Yeah.
over the 12-month period. Single, two-person family separate.
Well, that's just the co-payments.
That's just the co-payments. That's what the employee actually spends at the provider's office. How about that?
So the $62,717 is what the 106 single members paid in co-payments.
That's correct.
And this $591.67 is $62,717
correct.
divided by 106.
Exactly.
Okay. Got it.
So just to try and make this even more
Give a
simple,
point.
if under the board plan, the board gives the single person $500, is that right? Is that
1,000 single.
Okay, 1,000, and the average employee would actually have spent less than that.
That's on co-payments, correct.
Right. And so the difference between the plans is that the employee is responsible for the first $1,000. On average, the employee spent $591.
Actually, that's not entirely true.
Well, clarify, please.
Okay. Under the high deductible health plan, the employee is actually not responsible for any money up front. The Board of Ed actually gives the employee money up front, $1,000 a single, $2,000 a family. Until that money is exhausted, the employee doesn't have to spend any money for any services.
I was going to ask you that question, because I looked in the agreed upon language, I didn't see anything about that. Is that in the agreement someplace, or is that the practice that the account is it funded at the beginning of the
It's on a
plan year?
case-by-case basis, depending on what we negotiate.
What? Could you repeat your
The
question,
question
John?
is the contribution that's going into the employee's account funded at the beginning of the plan year or on some other basis?
That's not addressed. The agreed language says that it's 50% funded by the board. When it's funded is not actually in the agreed language.
Uh-huh. Well, if it was funded at the beginning of the plan year, then they wouldn't have any out-of-pocket expenses, is that right?
Well, they wouldn't have any out-of-pocket expenses until they exhausted that $1,000 or $2,000 contribution from the board. Remember, their deductible is $2,000
Yeah.
and $4,000.
And, John, I think your question relates really more to cash flow than expense, because even if the board funds this in the typical quarterly or 50%, however that is clarified, the actual responsibility for the employee to spend his or her money would only happen after that board contribution was exhausted. I'm sorry to interrupt with these questions, but please proceed.
Okay. So, if you take into account the $1,533 that an average employee in Wilton Board of Ed would spend in co-payments during a 12-month period, and you add that, and I'm just going to use the family as an example. You add that with the $45.33 under the PPO, because that's where the majority of them are. You're spending over
That was the premium share?
of the premium cost share, correct? You're spending $6,066 annually under your current PPO plan.
Where are you, Ralph?
I'm just going through relativity.
He's adding numbers from
So, John, if you take the premium cost share, so at 18% premium cost share, which they're currently paying, based upon the current allocated premium number, an employee pays $4,533 in premium cost share on a family side. You add that number with the average out-of-pocket, and they're spending $6,066 annually on average. Some will spend more, some will spend less. With the proposed PPO plan, the maximum liability,
Excuse me, you said proposed
proposed
PPO.
high deductible health
I
plan,
want-
sorry.
Yeah.
The proposed high deductible health plan, the employee cost share is $3,076. Their maximum liability for a doctor's office visit is another $2,000. Right?
Where'd the 3
$3,076. If you turn to the sheet, that's the premium cost share
Okay.
of the high deductible health plan at 16%.
Okay.
So another $2,000, they spend $5,076,
Why'd you add another 2,000?
because that would be their maximum liability. I'm comparing their average to their maximum. It's the best case scenario.
And what was that figure, the 5,001?
It's taking the premium cost share.
I got that, I just...
Okay, plus if they were to max out their deductible,
Right.
4,000, so it's another 2,000, Cliff?
Right.
So you add the 2,000 to the $3,076 in premium cost share, it's $5,076.
And that's for family coverage.
That's for family.
Are you waiting to proceed, or would you like a question?
I would like a question.
Okay.
Smart man.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, the board's proposal would actually, in many cases, save the employees money and save the board money to the tune of about 12% for the coming year as proposed. Is that right?
That is correct.
Now, one of the things I expect you to hear from the association, and I'm speaking to the panel, is that if the panel gives this away, there's going to be all this money that we can now put into the salary account. And I just wanted to ask the witness whether you have predicted what trend is for the coming year. And once we save reduce costs by 12%, but then how long is it before now we start the inexorable increase in health insurance costs again? And could you, I do believe you prepared
Yeah,
a document in your materials.
Twice a year, my firm holds a meeting with all the...
Okay, and just so the panel can follow this, where we were looking at out-of-pocket expenses in the materials, it's about 5 sheets earlier.
Mine doesn't have pretty colors.
Well, that's a public school copy.
This is it.
That's it.
I haven't
That's
had,
it.
I'm just complaining.
So, there's an element that we have to be aware of called medical cost inflation. Even if our claims were to break even or come in where projected, there is an element of inflation that needs to be accounted for. Twice a year, we track the inflationary numbers specific to the public sector marketplace in Connecticut. This is public sector specific in Connecticut. There may be other reports that give different inflation rates. This is for this market. We poll all the carriers. Carriers report twice a year to our office what those trends are. We see the trends fluctuate from year to year,
I'm sorry.
but
My apologies.
I'm sorry, we see the trends what?
we see the trends fluctuate from year to year. However, I can testify to the PPO trends being 12% or higher, and currently Anthem, who is the current administrator of this plan, has their PPO trend at 12.5%. The HSA plans have in the past fluctuated wildly from the current administrator, Anthem. Their last report to our office was in July 26th, had the high deductible health plans at 9% trend. Okay. The trend factors between an HSA and a PPO, 3 to 4% on average per year. Moving forward, when you look at the cost of the insurance, if we were to keep the PPO plan in place, we can expect an inflationary charge of 12.5%. If we move to a high deductible health plan, we can expect an inflationary charge of 9%. Say 3% just in inflation alone. So when you're doing your underwriting analysis going forward on your claims projection, because this is a self-insured plan, you're going to get a 3% credit from Anthem moving forward if you move to an HSA plan at renewal time. So the base rate has a reduction of 24%. Moving forward, that 24% will remain in place, but now we'll have a 3% kicker the next year. So the inflation rate will rise only 9% as opposed to 12.5%.
And so even in the best case scenario, the panel sees the wisdom of the board's position here. we would still expect a 9% trend. And so the cost reductions that are now offset by the board contribution to deductible, now down to 12%, would cause health insurance to be a little bit lower for 1 year, and then we're back to a 9% trend?
Say that again.
Yeah. If the board accepts the board's offer, we still expect these costs to be going up at 9% a year. Is that correct?
For the high deductible health plans.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, and God forbid, if the PPO is in play, that's a 12% trend.
That is correct.
The association's going to argue to the panel that the HSA should be offered as an option, and that life should go on for anyone who wants the PPO to stay in the PPO at whatever premium contribution is ultimately decided by the panel. Is that a good idea or a bad idea, and why?
In my opinion, it's a bad idea.
And why is it a bad idea?
Well, it's going to hurt the members first and foremost, because you're going to be making, or I expect that the association to be making some plan design changes that will shift some of the cost burden to the members. So those average out-of-pocket expenses will actually rise. We will have a smaller reduction in allocation premium costs with those changes. You have to make an awful lot of changes to save 24%. So if you were to make a substantial amount of reductions, I could see, okay, your allocated premium costs reduced, but now you've taken on the burden of cost shifting to the member, to your employees or your members of the association. So the employee's out-of-pocket expense is going to be more one way or the other. Under the HSA plan, you're reducing the premium cost share. You're reducing the allocation premium rate. And you're capping their out-of-pocket expenses to a fixed dollar amount. You're going to save a lot of money from the employee side. From the board side, there may, based upon the numbers that are projected, there should be a savings, and I'm using the word should be a savings. But since this is a self-insured plan, the board is making a contribution to a deductible funding for claims that may or may not occur. So the board is taking on expense right away for claims that may or may not happen. The hope is that because this is a health savings account, that account becomes the employee's property. The employee owns that account. Any money going into that account, it's the employee's, and it is portable. The employee takes that money in that account with them if they leave employment. So any money going into that account belongs to the employee. If the employee needs to spend that money, they'll probably spend, it's up to them, the board's money contribution first. And if they continue to have claims in excess, they'll pay out of their own pocket that additional $1,000 or $2,000. And then they're capped, and then it's 100% thereafter. The issue from the board side, because the board is taking a risk with this, is that you have some participants in this plan that may not have any claims, or may go for a preventive care visit that is covered 100% by the administrator. And therefore there is no out-of-pocket or no reduction. The hope is that the term consumerism, definitions in this book, consumerism is that the employee will realize what the true value of the healthcare costs are and make better informed choices about where to go for provider services and when they need to go for provider services. So for example, you can go for an MRI here in town, it'll cost you $1,600. You can go up to Danbury Hospital or Norwalk Hospital to have that same MRI for $800. Where are you going to go? Remember, it's your money up front. So that hopefully will kick in and get back to the consumerism concept. This HSA is nothing new to anybody who's been employed back in the 70s and 80s. It's the old indemnity plan that has been adjusted for inflation, except now you've got the benefit of a tax-free bank account to help support that high deductible. Remember the old days when you had the $100, $200 deductible, and there was 100%? Same plan, adjusted for inflation 20 years later.
Could I just ask about this notion that we should have an HSA as an option, and what, if any, concern you have about adverse selection, so that the person without the claims is going to take the money, the person with the claims is going to stay in the PPO?
And that's the other concern I have. If you leave the PPO as an option, the folks will perceive, I should say folks, the participants of the plan will perceive that if they need to go to a provider for a costly service, hospital copay will pay $100, $200 copay. Whereas if they were on the HSA, they may have to pay the deductible up to $4,000. So the sickly people will tend to migrate towards the PPO. More healthy people will join the HSA because their perception is that, well, it's a high deductible, I only go for physical exams, but I'm going to get $1,000 or $2,000 from my employer. And I'm not going to really spend it, so I'll build up my account. It's sort of an adverse selection if you leave it open as an option, where the more sickly population will join the PPO and the healthier folks will stay, join the HSA. Now, proper education will hopefully erode that, but you never know.
The association has claimed that through the further negotiation process and the agreed language that is before the panel, it has made, quote, significant concessions relative to insurance, even though it insists that the HSA be only an option and not mandatory. Do you have any credible projections for whether the board would reduce its costs at all if, in fact, any employee in the bargaining unit can stay in the PPO at his or her own choice?
If we left the PPO as an option, the best case scenario I've predicted in other towns and municipalities with pretty accurate results, with the proper education, doing a lot of education meetings on the plan, getting to see the membership. Best case scenario, as an option, we get 30% of the population into the HSA.
Some of which would be there because they're going to take the money
They're going
and
to
not
take the
have the
money,
claims.
right. And the board
Some of
will
them.
have paid out money that may not have to have paid under the PPO plan.
Do you, could you give the panel a sense for the magnitude of cost reductions through the changes that the association has agreed to on the PPO?
Sure.
And back again, it's probably best to look at the agreed language to see exactly what those changes are, so that you can speak with authority. I would like to point out to the panel that when you look at the agreed language, the office visits is shown as a change. This is on page 12 of the agreed language. The other things shown as changes are indeed changes, but I do want to point out that the office visit is not a change, because if you look on the next page, that was a change that went into effect July 1, 2011. So that's not a change. So the, quote, significant concessions that the association has made, which should somehow win the day here, apparently are going up 100 on the hospital admission.
To be fair, Tom, the hospital admission, if you look at that same page, is already 200. We're going up 50.
Okay, thank you for correcting me. Going up 50 on the hospital admission, going up 50 on the outpatient and emergency room, and the out-of-network deductibles. How significant do those changes significantly, do those changes affect future costs?
Okay, so what I'd like to do, just to make sure we're clear and I'm not missing something, I have listed in my calculations an increase in the ER copayment to $150,
Correct?
increase in the inpatient copayment to $250,
Correct.
increase in the outpatient copayment to $150,
Correct.
increase in the deductible to $400 and $800, 400 single, $800 family. It's a $100 increase
On the out-of-network?
on the out-of-network deductible.
Correct.
Correct, sorry. And the out-of-pocket on the out-of-network side could increase to $1,200 and $2,400.
Those are the changes.
Okay. There's also additional changes for the brand name prescription, non-formulary prescription. So,
I'm sorry,
with
non-formulary and what?
non-formulary and mail order delivery.
Thank you.
Yes.
Based upon the data that we've received from Anthem, the medical savings is a total of 3.1% reduction. The pharmacy savings is a 4.5% reduction to the pharmacy plan claims. The pharmacy plan claims are 19.6% of the total claims, which is about 20%. 20% of 4.5 is 0.9%. Total reduction in plan cost is 4% for the PPO. When you couple the PPO trend at 12.5%, it's an increase of 8.5%.
I'm sorry, 8?
8.5%.
That's based on the trend.
We're adding the trend to it. So just say you have a trend increase.
Have you been involved in, are you aware of settlements this year which resulted in a new collective bargaining agreement providing for medical insurance through a HSA-only option?
Yes.
And could you identify Exhibit 23, which comes immediately after the materials you prepared for the arbitration?
Where's that again?
No, it's Exhibit 22. I apologize.
22. Okay.
It's right after the report that the Rob's looking at.
Back in the insurance.
Oh, okay.
It immediately follows Mr. Fitzpatrick's report.
There you go.
John, you
Yeah, Exhibit 22.
This is a list that we worked off of, and I added the Naugatuck settlement. I was involved in the Naugatuck settlement just about a week and a half ago, where these are the towns that have this year, based upon the information I had settled for an HSA-only program.
Based on this, were in these towns that you say settle for an HSA program only, did these towns have the HSA as an option for a period of time?
I can't answer for all of them, but I was involved in Darien, Weston, Greenwich, Naugatuck, Meriden, and I believe all but Meriden, no, all of them did have an HSA at some
As an
point.
option?
Yeah, as an option prior.
Okay, thank you.
Are you ready to summarize? I don't want to cut you off prematurely. I appreciate your explaining the rationale for the board's offer. And if you aren't, you'll tell me, and if you are, could you just tell the panel your recommendation in terms of long-term addressing of health insurance costs?
In my opinion, I believe the HSA is, as a standalone plan, is the best option for both the teachers and the Board of Ed. The reason I believe this is the foundation from which we're starting from is a reduction that cannot be matched by any amount of changes in the PPO that we may present today. It gives the board enough savings while giving the employee a cap on their maximum out-of-pocket expenses. So both sides are protected here. The program also expands the plan of benefits from what they currently have in terms of the current PPO plan only allows the participant to have access to their medical benefits as listed in their plan document. Under the HSA plan, you can use some of the money in that HSA account, the bank account, for other services, goods and services, beyond your medical plan, such as covering any gaps in your vision plan, covering any losses in your dental plan or limits in your dental plan. You can use those monies in your health savings account under IRS code 213D. And there's a pretty extensive list of other services that you can use that money for. So not only are we presenting a plan that's going to save money for the town, cap the maximum liability for the teachers to less than what they're currently paying, but it expands the benefits, in my opinion, for the employees as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a few initial questions, and then if you'll bear with me, I would just like to, after I ask my initial questions, consult our insurance consultant.
Sure.
Just so that we can clarify the plan a little bit, Rob, you said there was a $2,000 $4,000 deductible in network. For the out-of-network, it's higher than that, correct?
No. It's one deductible in network or out of network.
You're not doing the 4,000, 8,000?
That's not a deductible. That's the maximum amount of pocket.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misspoke. The out-of-pocket costs for out-of-network goes to 4,000, 8,000, correct?
The out-of-pocket cost in network, the plan is a $2,000 in or out-of-network deductible.
Right.
After you've hit that deductible, if you utilize services with an in-network provider, all services will be covered at 100%. If you go to a non-network provider, the services will be covered at 80%. The employee will pay 20%. That continues on to a higher amount of an additional $2,000, $4,000,
Okay.
or the maximum out-of-pocket, out-of-network is $4,000, $8,000.
Thank you. You also
Wait,
talked...
just 1 minute, Marilyn, I just want to make
Yeah.
sure I have that. After the deductible, if you go out of network, you pay 20%,
That's correct.
up to another
2,000,
2,000, 4,000. Okay.
Of the reasonable and customary reimbursement amount.
Actually, there is no more reasonable and customary.
But the calculation based on a percentage of the Medicare reimbursements amounts.
Well, currently we're using Blue Cross Blue Shield, and it would be the Blue Cross maximum reimbursement cost. Other carriers may use the Medicare reimbursement amount.
No, that's okay. You talked in your, in your presentation it talks about 2003, we switched from Cigna. I saw that somewhere in here.
The first page of the
prior to 2003, Cigna was the provider. Was that because of a bid? You bid out the insurance?
I did not bid. I was a member of the Insurance Advisory Committee. At the time, from what I recall, this is quite a while ago, we were having significant problems with Cigna and the administration of the plan. The town was in a deficit position at that time, and we felt it was in the best option of the town, the Board of Ed, to look at alternative carriers. A bid did go out, and Anthem was selected as the administrator for the plan as of 2003.
When was the last bid since 2003?
As far as I understand, 2003 was the last bid.
Okay. Now, you've been involved with several other employer groups, employee groups, etc., in the process of bidding out insurance. Is it fair to say that you encourage regularly bidding out the insurance carrier to make sure that you get the most competitive rates possible?
Yes.
As a matter of fact, you've been involved, I know from personal experience, with Weston and Westport in the not distant past with a bid. They bid out their plans. They were also self-insured at the time, both of them. And they realized hundreds of thousands of savings through the bid-out process. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And yet, as far as you know, there has been no bid since 2003, correct?
As far as I know.
Okay. In your analysis here, looking at the savings to the employees and to the board, you're using an assumption of a 16% employee premium share.
I think that's the proposal that the board was presenting.
On HSA?
Yeah.
Correct, that is the board's, that's the initial asbestos offer.
It is the board's last initial last offer? Okay.
Right.
Oh, the 20% was for the PPO?
Yes.
Okay. You talked about on the EPO an average savings for a family of $43.30.
That's correct.
That's correct? So,
On premium cost share. If you take the current premium cost share at 13% with the current rates, allocation rates, and compared it with the allocation rate for the high deductible health plan at 16%, the premium would save the family $43.30.
okay. So that's just premium, that's not premium plus
That's correct.
deductibles. Okay. I'm also curious about the trend data in here. The last time I saw trend data, I got it actually from your office in connection with a different group that we were trying to figure out insurance on. And I recall the trend for the HSA being 12.9%
From Anthem, correct.
from Anthem.
As I said, they fluctuate wildly.
Okay, and that was just not, I think that was this fall.
If it was this fall, then that was data that was produced in January.
Okay, so that was by from January.
And the updated data was done on July 26th, and then again, we've updated that with Blue Cross at our annual trend meeting that we had in October.
Okay.
And again, if you look inside the packet, I do note that their HSA trends have fluctuated.
Okay,
wildly.
I haven't gotten that far in the documents yet. So, and I recall also at the time the PPO rate being lower than that. It was around 12%.
That's
Does that
correct.
sound right? Okay.
The Anthem PPO rates stayed constant between 11.8 and 12.8.
Okay, so the PPO rates fluctuate between 11.8 and 12.8?
Depending
roughly?
upon the year.
What about the HSA rates?
With Anthem, they're all over the place. They can go anywhere from 8% to 14%.
Okay. I want to ask about the HSA plan. In the current PPO plan, for the services that are under the block chiropractic, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy, right now there's not a cap on the number of visits that you can do. One of the concerns that we had raised in negotiations is that there appear under the HSA plan to be a cap on those of the number of times you can use those services in a given year. Have you been able to make any progress on having that cap lifted for this plan, or is that cap still in place in this plan?
If I can just note those caps. Let me identify what those caps are.
And what document are you
Okay,
referring
if
to?
you go into the insurance language, the Anthem Luminos HSA plan summary,
And which is part of the presentation
that's correct.
toward the end?
Yes. The document starts to look like this.
Does it have an exhibit number, Rob?
It's in my presentation, so it's just after the rate calculation. It's the tab called insurance exhibits. Keep going, say
okay.
2 more pages. Okay, so take that, flip it over, go to the 3rd page of the Luminos HSA plan summary.
Okay.
Your question was physical occupational speech therapy, the PT, OT, ST,
And Cairo.
and Chiro are limited to 50 combined visits per calendar year, per member per calendar year. That is Anthem's cookie cutter program. That is off-the-shelf program. Because this is a self-insured program, the board is the insurance company per se. I have not got an answer as to what their limits are from Anthem, but the question is in to them about what their limits can be extended to.
Okay, so as of right now, it may be that there's a cap now of 50 combined visits in those categories per year that we don't have in the current PPO plan. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so then what happens when a member hits the 50 mark? They pay fully out of pocket for those services?
They pay for the services.
I think the one other area, that at least that I'm aware of, that there's a difference between the HSA and the PPO plans is in the diabetic area. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Currently under your Century Preferred PPO plan, diabetic supplies and test strips are covered at 100%. Under the HSA, they would be applied to the deductible and coinsurance. And once you hit that deductible and coinsurance, it would be covered at 100%. And again, that would be combined with all other services.
Are there any other differences that we should be aware of between the two plans that I'm missing here?
Not that I'm aware of. I've done a pretty thorough side-by-side breakdown of this. But again, this is a self-insured plan. We have some latitude to make certain changes.
I think in your explanation of the HSA, you talked about preventative care being covered at 100%.
Yes.
And under the PPO plan, when you go for routine physical and you have routine blood work done, you don't have a copay associated with the blood work. It's just covered. That's not true with the HSA, though, correct?
Depends on what the diagnosis code is.
I thought you had to pay, based on the info we got back from Anthem, you had to pay for the blood work.
As I dug into it a little bit more, I believe Maureen Foster had emailed you. It said that the diagnosis code would render what that additional blood work would be. Mm-hmm. And that blood work that you would have to pay for
Right.
did not exceed $10.
Right, but there is a cost for, depending on, and that was for one panel or one type of test. So if you have multiple tests or multiple panels, it could be whatever amount. But there is a cost associated with the blood work under the
correct.
HSA plan, correct?
And again, these are Anthem's standard plans.
Right.
Okay.
But that's right now what we have, as far as I know, in the proposal, unless you're suggesting there's some modifications to the standard plan, which I haven't seen yet.
I have no authority.
Right, okay. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is there are co-pays going in, and I think it's the third year under the agreed language for the prescription.
That's correct.
Is there, and you may not know the answer to this because I don't know if you have an answer to it yet, you were looking into, at one point, a cap on the prescription copays of $1,000, a single 2,000 family. Is that part of this plan?
The intent is to have a cap of $1,000 single, $2,000 family. I've received conflicting information from Anthony.
Okay.
But again, the board is self-insured. The board can design the plan the way it needs to be designed. You gotta go next. Remember that. Be next.
No, he was answering a question. He's not telling me a question.
Okay.
I asked him about vision. So I couldn't, I'll just tell you, I can't remember whether or not vision was under the PPO plan. Maybe you'll remember. That's what I was asking.
I believe the vision is a separate rider, or is it covered under the PPO plan? It's covered. It's covered. The way the vision would be covered, if you want me to clarify that?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out the difference on vision.
Okay.
And I was asking him instead of you, but you're there, so.
Typically, the way we do it with an HSA program, a high deductible health plan, is ophthalmologists, medical eye doctors with a medical degree would be covered as any other service, and it would apply to the deductible and co-insurance. If you go to an optometrist, we would have a separate rider for that vision service.
So we would need a separate rider then, added to this HSA for that.
Cover the refraction care,
Okay.
which I think that's how it's set up now.
I honestly can't.
I'll check that out. Get back to that.
Did you by any chance have an opportunity to run, and the answer maybe no, but to run the numbers to see what the cost savings would be based on our prescription plan changes to the, I know you gave us percentages, but did you do a dollar amount estimate on the dollar savings that the board would realize through those changes?
I think I did. I've done so many numbers I don't remember. I think I did. I may have it on my laptop.
Okay. Maybe when we have a break, you can take a look at that. I just want to make sure that we have agreement on the numbers on that.
Marilyn, I did.
Oh, you've got it there.
And it's in your packet.
Oh. Okay, tell me where.
Okay. Wilton Board of Education PPO cost calculations 2012-2015.
Where do I find that?
It's somewhere in that big old book.
It's just in front of where we were. It's just back a page from where we were.
Okay.
Excuse me one second. Just want my laptop.
Go ahead. Before the average teacher out of pocket. It's in the same tab, the insurance. It's before that stuff, I think. Oh, wait, no. Check this.
Do you have the sheet?
Yeah.
The top number should be 735.81.
I do. I don't think Dave is quite there yet.
I'll look over your shoulder.
Okay, that's fine. Okay.
What I did, does the panel have the sheet?
Yeah, we do, thank
Tom,
you.
do you have the sheet?
Yes.
That's the one right there. What I did with this calculation, this is a 3-year calculation, and I used the current cost for year 1. I didn't want to make an adjustment, an assumed adjustment. So I just used year 1 and made a reduction of the total 4% off the current rates, and that's how they work out. The board's proposing, if the PPO was going to be in place, the employee would pay 80%, the employee would pay 20%. And you see how the numbers work out. The top box in white, you guys have black and white, sorry. The top box shows the Board of Ed expense. The bottom box shows what the employees' cost shares would be with that PPO expense. PPO cost share 20. Then in the year 2 and year 3, I trended them up at 12.5% per year. Can't predict what that cost is, so just use the inflation rate of 12.5%.
This is showing, though, how much it's going to cost the board each year. What I'm wondering is, what is the if we look at what the board would have had to pay under the existing PPO, what those changes in co-pays save the board. And I don't think this tells me that.
Didn't save the board anything. The board's going to be paying more the next year than they paid the year before.
Not if it was based on the same. They're going to be paying more with no. If we kept the same insurance plan that we have today, no changes at all. Next year they would be paying some amount. The savings to the board, whatever savings to the board, are as a result, in large part, of shifting costs to the employees.
It testified that the cost of the board with the changes is going to go up 8.5%.
But my question is,
So how is there a savings?
Well, why don't we have the insurance person answer that question?
right? So what I'm looking at is if we had no changes, and there are a lot of districts, John, just to why I'm going here. There are a lot of districts that have had no changes to their insurance plan for a year or so. If we were just to leave the contract as is, there would be insurance costs going up, both for the employees and for the employer, as a result of trend. So when we talk about savings, oftentimes savings means cost avoidance. If that's a better way to term it, I'll use that phrase. What kind of cost avoidance would the board realize as a result of these PPOs? Is that a number that you've run? And maybe you've
Actually, as we walked into this room, I got the projection for next year using the most up-to-date claims. Now, I haven't shared this with anybody.
Okay.
It's much worse than the past 2 years. And I can email it to Ken or somebody, we can print it off the projections and the analysis. We're looking at a 21% increase if we make no plan changes to the PPO. That's a 21% claims projection increase.
Okay, that's still not really answering my question, though.
Could I offer perhaps help?
Please.
On the HSA analysis, you do show if the RX goes in the third year.
Yes.
So I presume that is factored in the cost avoidance by adding the RX on the HSA in the third year.
That's correct.
Thank you, Tom. That's what I'm looking for with the
PPO?
PPO.
Then it's added into the first year. Right now, I took the current plan cost on the allocation rate. The current plan cost for the PPO is $766.47.
Wait, where's the 7?
That's another sheet in the file.
Okay, that's
So if
not
you go
this
back,
one.
you can see it. So I took that number.
I'm sorry, what's it look like?
Could I just back up? What question is pending? What is the question we're being asked, if I might? So I'm part of the discussion here.
The question that still hasn't been answered is, we've made changes to the co-pays in the PPO plan. We've also agreed to add, at least as an option, an HSA plan. Comparing the plan as it exists now, the existing PPO plan with the existing co-pays, there will be a cost. This sheet doesn't show it. You may have another sheet here that shows that. If we compare what the costs would be for the existing plan versus what it would be with these co-pay changes, we will see the cost shifting that has been done through those co-pay changes. That's the number I'm trying to
I think the
see.
witness already answered that as 4%.
I asked for the dollar amount. If he had run the number to show the dollar amount. So I don't know, 4% of what, I don't know.
You take this sheet here.
Could you identify this sheet here?
This sheet here is exhibit.
Well, just
the one
what
that
does it
says-
say at the top?
It
PPO
says
cost.
the PPO cost calculations 2012, 2015.
Okay.
You didn't really put that into the record, did you? this sheet here.
Yes.
It's a technical term.
White out. Okay.
Hang on.
Not yet, Rob.
It's under that insurance tab, Rob?
Yeah.
Has a little-
It's in his presentation.
It's in this booklet.
Oh, is this it? We got it.
Okay.
PTO
Okay.
cost calculator.
So what I did is I took the current rate, reduced it by 4%, because